location: Louisiana State Penitentiary, Angola Prison, a sprawling maximum security prison deep in the swamps of Louisiana; Death Row Wing, a separate isolated building where the condemned await execution; the execution chamber, a room with a single electric chair, long out of use, but still connected to power. They found prisoner number 417 slumped in the electric chair, still wearing his cuffs. The problem was, he was scheduled to die next week. The warden called it a security lapse. The other guards called it impossible. The body was still warm. No record of movement, no signs of struggle. The cameras hadn't captured a single frame of him leaving his cell. But somehow, in the dead of night, he had walked out, straight into the execution chamber. And when they checked the footage again, the chair was empty. I had been working death row for less than a day when it happened. I told myself it was a fluke, a mistake. But when I opened my locker for my shift that night, there was a manila folder waiting for me. It wasn't part of my issued gear. It wasn't from the prison. And when I flipped it open, my hands went cold. Because it wasn't a case file. It was a list of rules. And at the top, scrawled in shaky, desperate handwriting, was a warning. If you want to make it through your first night, follow these rules exactly. Do not break them. The paper was old, creased, stained in places. Some of the handwriting looked rushed, frantic, like the last person who held it had been running out of time. I swallowed hard, reading. Rules for the death row night shift. Rule 1. Do not talk to any inmate through the cell doors after lights out. If they try to talk to you, ignore them. Rule 2. At 11:45 p.m., count the prisoners. If any are missing, do not attempt to find them. Mark them as present in the log. Rule 3. If you hear the sound of cell doors opening at midnight, keep walking. Do not look. The inmates are still inside. Rule 4. The security cameras will glitch at exactly 12:07 a.m. If you see something staring at the lens, do not rewind the footage. Rule 5. If an inmate whispers, "They come before the chair," leave the room immediately. You are not supposed to hear that. Rule 6. If the electric chair is occupied before a scheduled execution, lock the door and leave. Do not approach. Do not check the cameras. Rule 7. If you wake up in a cell wearing an inmate's uniform, do not panic. The new guard will not acknowledge you. He will follow the rules. I stared at the list, my fingers tightening around the paper. This had to be some kind of prank, some bullshit initiation ritual to mess with the new guy. But the last rule stuck in my throat. If you wake up in a cell. I closed the folder. The radio on my hip crackled. New guy, a voice muttered. Time for count. I stuffed the folder into my jacket and stepped into the long, silent hallway of death row. The hallway of death row was long, silent, and lined with steel-barred cells. Each inmate sat alone in a tiny concrete box, waiting for a future that wasn't really a future at all. As I walked, the overhead lights buzzed faintly, flickering every so often. It was almost midnight. I tightened my grip on the clipboard, swallowing hard. Count the prisoners. Mark them as present. That was the rule. That was the only thing I needed to do. 11:45 p.m. I started the count. Cell 1, present. A bald, middle-aged man sat on his cot staring at the wall. Didn't acknowledge me. Cell 2, present. Another inmate, long, greasy hair, sitting on the floor. Cell 3. I stopped. The man inside was standing near the bars, facing away from me. His breathing was too slow, too deep. I clicked my pen. Count check, I muttered. The second the words left my mouth, he moved. His head tilted slightly. Then, in a voice so low it barely reached me, he whispered. "They come before the chair." I froze. Rule 5. If an inmate whispers, "They come before the chair," leave the room immediately. You are not supposed to hear that. I took a step back. My pulse pounded in my ears. The man still wasn't facing me. I turned fast, heading toward the end of the hallway. I needed to get out of this block. I needed to. The cell doors rattled. I stopped. The entire row of steel bars shuddered, a deep metallic groan rolling through the prison walls. It sounded like something was moving between them, but the inmates weren't moving. 11:50 p.m., 5 minutes until midnight. I picked up my pace, my boots echoing against the tile. Behind me, I heard something breathing, but it wasn't coming from inside the cells. It was coming from the gaps between the bars, like something was moving through the empty spaces, something that wasn't supposed to be there. I reached the exit, swiped my ID. The door buzzed open. I stepped through, and the lights cut out. The lights cut out completely. A thick, pressurized silence filled the air, like the prison itself was holding its breath. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a metallic click, followed by another, and another. I recognized the sound immediately. Cell doors unlocking. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. Midnight. I took a slow step back. The hallway behind the security gate was pitch black, but I could hear it. One by one, the heavy steel doors groaned open, each one swinging out in perfect unison. I clenched my fists, my breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. Then, stillness. The inmates didn't move. They didn't step out, didn't react. I stood there, waiting for something to happen. A riot, a fight, a scream, anything. But there was just silence. I swallowed hard. Rule 3. If you hear the sound of cell doors opening at midnight, keep walking. Do not look. The inmates are still inside. I wasn't walking. I was staring straight at them. And something wasn't right. The air in the hallway was wrong now. Thicker, denser. Like the space had shifted. Like it was still deciding whether or not I was supposed to be here. The prisoners still sat inside their cells, unmoving. Then, in perfect unison, they all turned their heads, not toward the open doors, toward me. A slow, mechanical motion, too synchronized, like something else had turned them. My stomach tightened. The inmate in cell 3, the one who whispered to me earlier, sat on the edge of his cot, his arms resting on his knees. His eyes were open now, and they were completely black. The same deep, lightless black that you see in the gap beneath a locked door. A place where something is waiting for you to make a mistake. The emergency radio on my hip crackled. "Leave!" I turned so fast I nearly fell backward. The hallway was empty. No guards, no footsteps. The radio buzzed again. This time the voice was closer. "You weren't supposed to look." I didn't wait to hear more. I sprinted down the corridor, heart slamming against my ribs. Behind me, I heard the cell doors slam shut. I didn't stop running until I reached the security office. My hands were shaking as I swiped my ID. The door buzzed, and I slammed it shut behind me, locking it twice. The small office was lit by a single fluorescent bulb, casting everything in a sickly, yellow glow. The wall of monitors flickered with grainy security feeds, showing different angles of death row. The cells, the execution chamber, the empty hallways. I dropped into the chair, forcing myself to breathe. Then, with a deep pit in my stomach, I rewound the footage. The hallway feed loaded first. Timestamp, 11:58 p.m. The footage showed me doing the count. The inmates didn't move, except for the one in cell 3. I watched as my past self hesitated, as the prisoner tilted his head and whispered something too low for the cameras to hear. Then the clock hit midnight. I watched myself stop, and then the doors opened. A cold wave of nausea rolled through me as I watched. The bars swung out, one by one, but the prisoners never moved. But then, something else moved. At first, I thought it was just static, a flickering, shifting shadow in the farthest cell. Then it twitched. I leaned in, my fingers digging into the desk. The thing was tall, impossibly thin, crawling along the ceiling like an insect. Its limbs were too long, too sharp, and it was watching the prisoners. I felt sick. Whatever it was, it had been in the cells with them the entire time. The screen glitched. The figure snapped its head toward the camera. And then, the feed cut to static. I reeled back. The office suddenly felt too small, too quiet. Then, a new beep. My stomach dropped. One of the monitors had switched to live feed. It wasn't showing the cells. It was showing this room. I swallowed, looking around. The room was empty. But on the screen, I wasn't alone. Something was standing behind me. I turned, but the room was still empty. I looked back at the monitor. The thing in the screen wasn't moving. It just stood there, waiting. Then, the radio on my hip crackled, a low, wet whisper. "They come before the chair." The light bulb above me exploded, and everything went dark. The lights flickered back on. I was alone in the office. The security monitor that had shown something standing behind me was now just displaying static. My radio buzzed sharply. "New guy." It was the warden. His voice was gravel thick, calm, too calm. "Executions in 5 minutes. Get to the chamber." I hesitated. My entire body was screaming no. But I couldn't refuse. I grabbed my keys, forcing my hands to stop shaking. Then, with my stomach twisting into knots, I left the security office and headed toward the execution chamber. The room was colder than before. The electric chair sat in the center of the concrete floor, its straps neatly arranged, waiting. 3 other guards stood near the back wall, their faces unreadable. The prisoner was already strapped in. His wrists twitched slightly against the leather bindings. His breath was too shallow. His face was blank, like he already knew what was coming. The warden stepped forward, holding the official document. "Name, Roy Henley," he read. "Crime, first-degree murder. Sentence, death." A long pause, then, without hesitation, he nodded to the executioner. The switch was pulled. Electricity flooded the chair. But Roy didn't scream. He didn't jerk, didn't seize. Instead, he softened. His body began to sag like the bones inside were slowly melting. His skin turned waxy, his features distorting, stretching downward. His jaw drooped unnaturally, his fingers sinking into the armrests. One of the guards stepped back, eyes wide. The warden didn't move, didn't blink. Roy let out a soft, gurgling breath. His left eye slipped down his cheek. Then his body collapsed into itself, pooling into the chair like a candle left too long in the flame. I staggered back. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I had broken Rule 6. If the electric chair is occupied before a scheduled execution, lock the door and leave. Do not approach. Do not check the cameras. Roy had been in the chair before his time, and now he was gone. The executioner flipped the switch off. The room was silent. Then, slowly, the leather restraints tightened back into place, as if they had never held anyone at all. The warden turned to me. His face was blank. "You should get some rest," he muttered. I couldn't move. I could still smell burned wax. I could still hear the sluggish drip of something pooling beneath the chair. Then, as if nothing had happened, the warden exhaled and said the words that would haunt me forever. "We'll bring him back in the morning." I didn't sleep. I didn't go back to my bunk in the guard barracks. I just sat in the security office, The buzz of the monitors drilling into my skull. The execution replayed in my head. The way Roy had melted, the way the warden didn't react. And worst of all, his last expression. Not fear, not pain, just acceptance. Like he had already known what would happen. My radio crackled. New guy. Warden wants you in his office. I swallowed hard. My legs felt heavy as I stood up. Something in my gut told me I shouldn't go. But I knew. This wasn't an invitation. This was a summons. The warden's office was old. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, thick with decades of inmate records. He sat behind a large wooden desk, his hands folded neatly over a manila folder. A new case file. He didn't look up when I entered. Didn't offer me a seat. Just slid the folder toward me. Got a new one, he said, his voice flat. I hesitated, then reached out, flipping it open. My throat closed. The name on the file wasn't an inmate's. It was mine. Inmate. Eric Mathis. Prison ID 473-28-001. Sentence. Death. Execution date. Tuesday, 3 a.m. I felt the room tilt beneath me. No, I muttered. This has to be a mistake. The warden finally looked up. His face was expressionless. It's not a mistake. My hands tightened into fists. You put my name in this file. No, he said, shaking his head. The prison did. A sharp chill ran through me. I scanned the page again, flipping it over. There was a mugshot attached. It was me, but older. My face was hollow, sunken. My hair was thinner. And the worst part? The execution date had already passed. It wasn't set for next Tuesday. It was from years ago. I forced myself to look up at the warden, my pulse hammering. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at something behind me. I turned, and the security mirror on the wall showed a different reflection. The version of me in the glass wasn't standing. He was sitting, strapped into the electric chair, waiting. The lights in the office flickered violently. Then, a single piece of paper slid out from the folder. I picked it up with trembling hands. It was another list of rules, but this one wasn't for a guard. It was for a prisoner. And at the bottom, in my own handwriting, was a message I never remembered writing. Don't fight it. It's already done. The first thing I noticed was the cold. It clung to my skin like damp cloth, soaking into my bones. The second thing was the silence. Thick, oppressive, like the entire world had been placed under a suffocating glass dome. I opened my eyes, blinking against the dim, flickering light. The walls around me were concrete, dull gray, stained with decades of sweat and time. The cell, a death row cell. I sat up too fast, and the dizziness hit me like a brick wall. My uniform felt different, too loose, too rough. I looked down. Not my usual guard fatigues. I was wearing a prisoner's uniform. The realization slammed into me with brutal clarity. I staggered to my feet, hands clenching around the cold steel bars. "Hey!" My voice cracked, raw from disuse. "Hello?" Somebody talked to me. No answer. I turned, scanning the other cells. I wasn't alone. The hallway was lined with dozens of inmates, each in their own tiny concrete tomb. Some sat hunched on their cots. Some lay staring at the ceiling. But none of them moved. A cold weight settled in my chest. I recognized some of them. Not because I had guarded them, but because I had watched them die. My stomach turned violently. This wasn't possible. I saw Roy Henley. His body was intact, solid, sitting stiffly against the far wall of his cell. But his eyes were gone. His sockets were black pits, empty, as if whatever had melted out of him in that chair had never returned. I pressed my forehead against the bars, my breath coming in shallow gasps. No, no, no. The hallway buzzed to life. The sound of cell doors unlocking, not mine. Just one. I turned toward the far end of the block, where the entrance door was swinging open. A guard stepped in, young, crisp, pressed uniform, a clipboard in one hand, a radio on his belt. His boots echoed sharply against the concrete floor. I knew what he was doing. He was doing count, just like I had. I gripped the bars harder, my voice coming out shaky. "Hey, listen, you have to." He kept walking, didn't pause, didn't acknowledge me. He stopped at cell 1, muttered under his breath, clicked his pen. "Present." Then moved to cell 2. "Present." I shook the bars violently. "Look at me." Nothing. He didn't even flinch. "Cell 3, he muttered, reaching my door. I pressed myself against the bars, reaching out as far as I could. "I'm not supposed to be here. You need to check the records." He clicked his pen. "Present." Then he moved on. A sick, twisting horror coiled in my chest. I wasn't real to him. Not anymore. I let out a shaky breath, my head spinning. I needed to think. I needed to get out of here. I turned back toward the cell, my hands trembling. That's when I saw the folder, sitting neatly on my cot, untouched. A fresh manila case file. My stomach clenched. I took a step toward it, hesitating before reaching down and flipping it open. My name was printed boldly at the top. Inmate, Eric Mathis. Prison ID, 473-28-001. Sentence, death. Execution, date, Tuesday, 3 a.m. The paper crinkled beneath my white-knuckled grip. "No," I whispered. I flipped the page over. There was a photo attached. Mr. Bud Older. The face was hollow, sunken. The eyes dim. The mouth was drawn tight, like a man who had already given up. The worst part? The execution date was from years ago. I let the folder slip from my hands. A deep, nauseating realization bloomed in my chest. This had already happened. This had always happened. The door at the end of the hallway buzzed open again. Another guard stepped in. Older, broad-shouldered. His uniform was worn, familiar. I knew him. I had worked beside him. He stepped forward, stopping in front of my cell. And for the first time, someone finally looked me in the eye. A slow, knowing smile crept across his face. "Come on now," he said, voice calm. "It's time." I stepped back, shaking my head. No, this isn't." But the moment I moved, my legs felt heavy, like the choice had already been made. The prison had chosen me. The guard unlocked the door with a loud buzz. I tried to resist, tried to run, but my body walked forward on its own. Like I had always been meant to. Like this wasn't a mistake. It was a cycle. One that had been repeating long before I ever set foot in this place. The prison had needed a new inmate, and now it would need a new guard. I stepped into the hallway. The door slid shut behind me, and somewhere, at the far end of death row, a manila folder appeared inside an empty locker, waiting for the next one.